was probably something like 4 days. We really went like back and forth. Sean was doing a lot of thumbnailing, and I was doing like really rough blockouts to kind of help work out, with on the 3D side how things were going to work. And then on the execution side of, once we sort of I got that final concept from Sean and took it forward. Um, the high poly modeling was really intensive because of the amount of detail on that. That was probably like a week and a half of full time work. Um, Low poly, I found pretty quick. So we're probably looking at 2 weeks and a bit with change. I think the high and low poly, get all the UVs done, and then um, texturing. I spent ages kind of working on that stuff. So that was maybe texturing and lighting, maybe another 2 weeks. So all in, we're probably looking at about 4 to 5 weeks, probably. I think best guess because we're doing it like like I said, in our evenings after we've worked a day, or working like on a Saturday or a Sunday in our spare time. So that's probably my best guess on that.
Okay. When I've got a question from Tim. When did you use any trim sheets on that, or was it you just a straight UV layout on that? There's no trim sheets on it, or was there?
No, there's no trim on that. We're sort of taking the approach that it was a unique prop.
Yeah, get it. Yeah.
Like we're going to use it in a cutscene or something, and then we do lower detail versions for if it was going to be in a game. So with that, we wanted it to be quite high fidelity, like it was going to be in a cutscene. So everything was a unique
Yeah.
unwrap and bake for that.
It's interesting. Getting a lot of questions these days about trim sheets. It's like it's amazing that trim sheets have come back kind of the way they have done it because of the VR thing and the optimization. It's a bit of it seems like a legacy technique to me, but now it's all come back.
Oh no, it's a great one. I mean, it's really important these days with environment artwork.
Yeah.
Trim sheets are really important.
Yeah. Well, okay, I've got another one for you, which is it's from, I think it's one of my students. What are your thoughts on Blender? Because everyone's talking about Blender at the moment, aren't they? Because of the recent updates have started to look quite tasty. And where do you think Blender is currently sitting in 3D production at the moment?
I've actually just started using Blender a bit more in my own workflow. I really like it. I've only started to use it for a few things. I use day to day. I use Maya, but I've started to do most of my sculpting now exclusively in Blender. I get on really well with that, and I think I don't know if anyone's checked it out yet. It's been around kind of most of this year. The grease pencil. It's a really different way to kind of concepting. If you do your traditional 2D stuff, to be able to do that in the 3D environment, draw on a 2D plane but in a 3D environment, is a real mind bender. I found when I first started doing it, but it allowed me to do concepting in a less traditional way. I found that a really powerful thing. So I think long term, I think Blender's a really interesting prospect. We can see that, financially there's a lot of big games companies getting involved, and for a free tool, it's amazing.
Yeah, it really is, and it's a thing that's free. Yeah, I think the likes of Autodesk are going to start getting worried soon. One of the things for our students is access to software when they're at home is a challenge. Like the Adobe thing, is always been a challenge for us, and it's great to have incredible pieces of software being available to students for nothing. And to see all that heavy weight sort of back into Blender, I'm really excited about what we're going to be able to do with that in the future. Another question I've got here. Sean's just kind of prompted me to look at this one. Fundamentals, art fundamentals that beginners need to prioritise, and I think that's probably something that Anya might be able to look at. And I kind of think, Anya, that you've a lot of those fundamentals you've covered in your talk. So could you help out with that question, Anya, about fundamentals for beginners to prioritise?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I think everyone comes into art from different routes. But the thing that I always tend to notice that a lot of the sort of really talented artists have done is that they often come from a traditional background. So they might have learned, say, painting, or like literally just going out with like a pencil and a pad and sketching. And that helps with both 3D and 2D. So at my university course, I was it was grilled into us that we had to learn traditional art. So we were sent out in the rain to do sketching of various landmarks around Leicester. And that's to learn things like perspective and value and, like noise and stuff that I've discussed in my talk. But learning that from a traditional art perspective can be really useful. Not being able to sort of use Control Z to undo stuff, and you have to really be confident in your lines and what you're putting down on paper, which takes a lot of work. But yeah, just I think traditional art is a really useful thing to start from. All the basics, as I've discussed, like color and light, are so useful for both 3D and for 2D.
Well, another question for you potentially here, Anya, is a question that says, what is a common... This is a tricky one, this, because I know a lot of people have different ways of starting a piece of work. But from your perspective, if you were kind of pressed on the idea of a step-by-step or staged way of preparing to create a piece of concept art, what are the stages, the processes you would go from, right from that initial idea in your head? Is that something that you can?
Yeah. Well, for me personally, it's a bit of a messy process. There's no one way about it, but for me personally, usually something starts out with like a really quick scribble, like just a super rubbish sketch or like 4 sketches. Just really like scribble out with like just a black line. Be like, yeah, maybe there'll be like a bridge here, and maybe there'll be the foreground, and behind it there might be some really huge interesting clouds, or maybe it'll be a super blue sky, and I'll just figure that stuff out. And then often for me, I will take that and then start blocking it out in 3D. So this is where Unreal Engine comes in for me. I'll block it out usually in like 3ds Max. I'm trying to get into VR at the moment for sketching out stuff in 3D. And then I can dump that in Unreal Engine and like test out the lighting without having to do it manually, sketching that stuff. And then, that 3D block out, kind of to a certain extent provides the perspective and stuff. So I still think it's important that you learn your fundamentals, like 1-point perspective, 2-point perspective, and so on. But things like 3D do definitely help with that as well.
Just as a follow-on question, another one for you, Anya. What do you one of the questions we asked was, what do you think the pros and cons are of actually using 3D in what people kind of consider that concepts out? They think a lot of people think of it as being more sort of coming from a traditional sort of standpoint, but that's one of the things that's really interesting about your work is how you're using the 3D as well. So what do you think are there any what are the pros and cons of actually using the 3D in your work?
The big con, I would say, is that it can lead to people being lazy. So they think that the 3D is going to do everything for them, and then they actually lose out. There might be a certain feel to art that you only get from having sort of hashed stuff out yourself from like a purely 2D point, or like you still have to, if you're using 3D as a block out, you still have to use a certain amount of fundamental understanding of especially things like color and light, which obviously a 3D block out can't do all for you. So you still need to learn that stuff, and it can be tempting to just forgo all of that learning and go straight into the 3D. But from a pro perspective, it does do a lot of heavy lifting. It can be way quicker to block stuff out and just test out tons of different angles, especially if this is something that's going to be made in an actual game. Being able to actually walk through the space and feel the space as a gamer it's a massively helpful thing, not just for you and like feeling out of space, but handing that off to environment artists or designers as well.
Can I just ask the same question to Sarah? I just realised that you're just a bit further down the list there, Sarah. It's great to have you in the room too. Obviously, right. Sarah, what's your view on that pros and cons thing? I know obviously your artwork is driven very heavily by 3D, and I was interested to hear about the things you were saying about you know, you sort of pre-visualizing all your kind of shiny surfaces and stuff. What would you say? Is there any what are the advantages and disadvantages from your kind of workflow position?
Yeah, I think the advantages is also just to add to that is speed, because you can, especially if you've got like quite a lot of assets you've built up over the years, you can then quickly get quite a lot of shapes out really fast in 3D and show what it looks like like in 3D, and like have a proper look around to make sure that you want to dedicate all your time to it. But a con is also like I find like a lot of people struggle when they buy. I suppose it's like buying the brushes on like ArtStation, because you do have all these kit bash sets now that are available to you. Um, but it's like utilizing them efficiently, because it's not always going to be sort of what you're after. So it can make you not like not learn how that person has done it, and therefore it can cripple you that way, because you're not learning that technique. So that is a con that to it is like, as I say, you're not learning how they've done that in the first place.
Yeah.
So yeah, I do agree with that.
I've got a supplementary question for you, Sarah. How do you build and organize your asset library for materials and shaders, and how much do you value a procedural workflow when creating assets? That's kind of two parts of there.
Yeah, well, I use Keyshot, so my materials, I create a lot of materials in Keyshot and save them as a package, so that I know that if I've created a vehicle that I really like, or a certain technique that I really like, I'll save that and put that in like my material folder in Keyshot and save it. And there's, like I say, with Keyshot being a node-based system, you can make loads of materials really quickly, which is really cool. And then from that, obviously, you can organize all your materials and things, and put them in, like I say, different folders, and that's how I keep those organized. Assets and stuff like that, like nuts and bolts and little pieces and like of 3D, I tend to keep in like separate folders until I need them. So I've got like bulkheads, or nuts and bolts, or landing gears and things like that, because obviously I'll sketch out a landing gear and go, oh, that's cool, and then I'll just save that off for maybe later use, because some of the shapes are like what I call like happy accidents, and I'll be like, oh, that'll actually be quite cool for later on. So I'll save that out and keep it in like a folder structure when I know everything is. Like I've got like a ship folder, and then I've got loads of assets that I can grab from there as well.
Right, fantastic. Yeah. I'm getting loads of private messages off Mooney here. He's battering me with questions. Yeah, my head's spinning. Mooney, stop sending me. I can read the question list, mate.
You're on. Good luck.
Thanks, Mooney. The one for this is one for Dave. Well, it's actually for all of you, really. How do you? This is something students struggle with. I think quite a lot. How do you stay motivated? What keeps you going? What are the things that drive you? Can I ask Dave first? How do you go through all these incredibly detailed procedures and not lose the will to live? What drives you?
Actually, I guess for that stuff, big part of it for me is preserving the motivation, so I kind of protect it. We all have it at the start of a project. You can get really excited and you want to do all the hours, but I will, like, even with personal stuff, I'll make sure Saturday I won't work, I won't go near the computer, or Sunday I won't go near it. I find having that, forcing myself to have that break, after going through a lot of projects and stuff, that really helps preserve that kind of enthusiasm, that initial enthusiasm for a project, and keeps the motivation going. I think the other side of it for me is, as I'm going through a project, I've invested all of this time to get halfway. I think it's common. We all get to a point where you start to question, have I done the right thing? Do I need to go back? Do I need to change something? Or more extreme. But then, yeah, you know, when you get over the kind of hill of it, you're sort of like, oh, I've come this far now. I can see, you know, especially when you've done a few projects, that kind of helps give you a bit of perspective. It's like, oh, I can see the end, you know, and I can see, you know, kind of everything I need to do to get this finished now.
And have you got any tips on keeping your motivation levels up, Anya?
I'm really bad at stepping away from the computer. Like, I do a lot of like side work, so I'm always at the computer, and so I do find myself losing motivation sometimes. And one of the things that I've learned sort of over the last couple of years has been actually to kind of sometimes accept that the motivation's not coming, and like, just I've had it before where I've been doing like personal work. You know, you'll be like working a full-time job, you've got a personal project on the side that you can be super motivated about, but sometimes you just lose the will to live, as you say. And sometimes I just accept that I'm not going to be doing any personal work for like a month, and I just step away from it, and that's like fine, because you know we've got our entire lives to do personal work. So don't like beat yourself up, because the more you beat yourself up over the fact that you don't feel motivated, the less motivated you are going to get, because you just associate personal work with feeling sad, basically. So it's good sometimes to just step away and accept that the work's not going to happen. And then that sort of stepping away, usually, you know, go out and see the world, go see cool things. Like, I love going to gardens and seeing the like interesting flower beds and water fountains and stuff. Like, that's what inspires me. So I get out and I find that thing that inspires me, take loads of photos, get excited about it, and then usually the motivation just comes back on its own.
Yeah, there's so much good advice in there. I think one of the things I see a lot is artists just beating themselves up all the time. You know, getting into that kind of loop where they're being down on themselves, and you know, everybody needs to not do that. And as Dave said, take some time. Don't, you know, if you're really hungry for success and you want to push things forward, that's great. But be kind to yourself. Look after yourself. Get sleep is the big one for me. It's like, try and get enough sleep. You'll be a lot more creative if you're sleeping. What do you think about that, Sarah? What kind of gets you out of bed in the morning? Or not? Like, you should stay in bed, shouldn't you? And have getting plenty of sleep. I've just said that.
Well, I mean, that is true. And I also have another like hobby that keeps me sane, and it's 3D printing. And I found a lot of relaxation in that, is actually making things like physical so that I can touch them and feel them. I know that sounds weird, but it's kind of like it's just like a hobby that turns my mind off from thinking about 3D and 2D a little bit, and goes to something completely different, like how I set something up and like make something in like real life, and to actually see it on a table like next to me is like kind of was what being like what's driving me at the moment, is like just having like just an extra hobby to turn my brain off so that I'm not thinking about work. It's just something that, you know, I enjoy doing after work to tinker with, you know.
Yeah, absolutely incredible advice there. It kind of is pretty common sense in it, but I think we sometimes get a little bit, you know, especially with work-based stuff, you know, where there's always, you know, questions and you know, on Q&As like this. Surprisingly, we haven't had today about crunch. And don't put yourself through your own crunch. You know, be kind to yourself, get plenty of sleep, go out, get some fresh air, you know, if you're allowed to. And yeah, I'm worried about that in Manchester at the minute. So yeah, that really good. Mooney, come on, you can remind me now. Give me another question.
Oh, sorry, no, I was off having fun on my own. You're on your own there, mate.
He's spat his dummy out.
You want me to have a look for you?
His toys are out of the pram. Come on, Mooney, come on, help me out.
Why don't you ask a question, Baz, while I have a look?
All right. Okay. Here's an interesting one. This is from one of my students. What is your opinion between Adobe and Corel? You know, like, I think referring to Painter. Does anybody use Painter instead of Photoshop? You know, or use maybe Clip Studio or something that's not Adobe Photoshop? Out to any of you guys who want to answer that.
I've never used it.
You've never used Photoshop, or you've never used Corel Painter? All right, okay. That's interesting.
Definitely use Photoshop every day.
Right, okay. Well, that was a nice simple one. No.
No, I say yeah. I'm the same. I'm a Photoshop lass. So.
Right. Yeah. Well, I've over the years I've used Coral Painter. I started out with Coral Painter because I had a traditional media sort of background, and it was the first thing I thought, oh yeah, that's going to help me paint like when I'm painting in acrylic and oils. But yeah, Photoshop is it's kind of the industry de facto in it, really 2D. What have we got here? What are some good habits to? I guess when the question is, what are some good habits to create? Now, I think that must be to do with artwork, not other areas of your life. Like don't bite your nails or anything like that. So, Dave, what good habits do you try and foster in your life, mate? Are you there?
Oh man, that's yeah. I've got a lot of
try and
habits,
keep it to
good
artwork.
habits good habits I'm trying to develop. I guess one of the biggest first ones I had, thinking back to when I was a student, is I would often like jump the gun, and I didn't really respect kind of how important reference is. And I make a real point now of saying to people that I work with and the staff on my team, it's like, reference and research is a part of the job. It's the first, really important step. So before any project, I make time for it. It's, with the headgear, I think me and Sean sat down and we just looked at loads of images on Google image search or Pinterest, maybe for like a good 3 or 4 hours, just to make sure you got everything in there. And that kind of helps develop the ideas. Yeah, I think that's a really important one. If you're I think if you're a concept artist, that's really important. But I think it really helps, with my 3D stuff, and I think it will help other people,
Yeah, I think what are your views on that, Sarah? Do you have you got any interesting habits you'd like to reveal to us?
I mean, my one is keep a good file structure as well. Like, if you've got like a load of, I say, like 3D files, 2D files, reference files, because again, like going back to like my student days, I was a bit sloppy with that, and like I would have files all over the place, and like it named like new folder, new one folder, final one, final finished one, and all that. And
I still do that.
I'm hashtagging stuff now. I've put hashtags in front of things now to bring it to the top of the stack.
It's just, I just find like it was battering my brain. I was causing myself out my like stress, because I was like, oh no, I don't remember what like I'd called it, because I was in like such a like, I don't know, I was just so like lazy. I was just, I'll just call it final 2 or something, and I'll think about it later. And then I'd shut down the computer, and then like the next day I'd be like, oh no, I don't remember what I called it. So I try and be structurally sound with my filing system, because I've had some nightmares trying to track down a file.
Yeah, I my best filing system at the moment is the desktop, of course. So if you were to see I have a desktop, I fill it up right to the brim, and then I make a folder that says tidy, desktop tidy, with a date, and I dump everything into it. It's like a virtual. It's like that drawer in the kitchen, isn't it, where you've got all the bits and pieces.
Oh god.
And you don't want to throw any of it away, so you've got like half broken corkscrews and stale biscuits. Oh no, I shouldn't have admitted that. Sorry.
No, I was causing myself so much stress doing all that, because I was just dumping it everywhere, and then I ended up like that with personal projects as well. Like I'd get really excited to make a personal project, save it as something that I never remember, and then I'd find it in 6 months when I did a clean, and I was like, oh god, I remember that.
Yeah.
So yeah, just saves the headache down the line a bit of of trying to find something.
Well, I've got another general one here for you that I opened the floodgates, didn't I, when I mentioned crunch, because I hear a lot of students I see it on forums, people talking about crunch and worrying about crunch, and I'm kind of when you're working for an organisation that I'm going to say stuff here that's pretty controversial, but crunch is usually born out of understaffing or bad management. And you don't have to answer it. I can say that because I'm out of that at the minute. So I can't get in trouble off my boss at the studio. So
It's true.
So crunch, if you don't mind, I'm kind of leading on this a little bit. I'm going to ask your opinion about it. I've had a lot of crunch in my life, so I'm quite passionate about talking about this. But crunch exists in your life. You've got crunch every day. But one of the things that I think is we need to sort of think about, young people going, it's not fair, I'm having to crunch. Well, it's kind of a resilience thing as well. You kind of do have to crunch a little bit. You crunch in your life. The bus, is going to leave the station at a certain time. You've got to make sure you project plan up to the bus time. Make sure you put your socks on time. Make sure you had your breakfast in good time. But that's when you're managing your own life. The problem with crunch is when someone else is managing your life, and that's when it gets horrible because your manager's putting you in crunch. No matter how organised you are. So now I've had my little say on it. What do the artists think about crunch? Have you ever experienced crunch, and how do you deal with it? It's a tough one to answer, really, isn't it? Because it's so variable and on different projects. Go on, who's going to answer that one?
It's a difficult one to answer because
it really is, isn't it? Yeah.
It's like, I think as well. It's like because I don't know about anyone else, but myself, it's like I have to be satisfied with my work, so I tend to stay behind anyway.
Yeah.
To make sure that the piece where I've left it is where I'm happy at.
Yeah.
And I've found like myself doing that like a fair bit. Like I'll just save and go home and then do more. Because like I say, I suppose it. Like I don't do it like at the moment or anything like that because, as I say, I've given myself a little bit of downtime. But especially when I first started in the industry, I kind of felt like I needed to push myself because I suppose it was like I kind of had something to prove. But now looking back, I'm kind of like I shouldn't have been so hard on myself, really.
You've probably you've improved a lot though, probably from that crunch is that kind of extra time, and it's boot camp, really, isn't it? When you're first starting out,
Yeah, it really is. Like, I know other people, like I say, who've come from quite intense crunch, and have it's made them like physically sick, and it is horrible to see. But like myself personally, I've only ever put it on myself, just because, as I say, it was kind of like I wanted to level up, kind of, and that was just thrown in the extra hours after work, and learning stuff in my own time, sort of thing.
And Anya, how have you dealt with crunch? Have you had some crunch in your life?
There was only a time when I was at Creative Assembly. I had again, I chose to kind of do it, and it was at a time when, again, I was early in my career, but I definitely wouldn't say that. Like for me personally, I don't think that I've improved as a result of doing crunch because it was on work that wasn't like looking at my work now and my work back then. There's like such a massive difference in terms of just the kind of work that I do because I've just like found my style and my thing, which was not that back then. So I did a little bit of crunch, but it was like because I wanted to. Personally, I am now like quite intolerant of the idea of crunch, and I don't think I would do it if I was being forced to do it on a regular basis. Like a bit here and there maybe, but again, it's like a self-motivated thing. If I was being made to crunch, I just probably would not be down for that. So I don't think crunch is a good thing at all.
Do you think a key to whether or not crunch is tolerable, is that, did I say that word right, is about whether or not you put it on yourself or it's enforced on you? Because when I was a contractor all my career, and I kind of had to hit sort of milestones, but I ultimately didn't have people, well, most of the time telling me to redo stuff or just messing me about. Basically, it's when the worst thing for me in a crunch situation is where you've got. I was usually art directing, but as an external, a sort of freelance art director, and the worst thing for me was when you would get a kind of overly ambitious producer that was the link between you and the client, and they would just ask you to do outrageous things and make you do things over and over again. and that is when crunch really drives you crackers, because
Yeah.
you're not you know that you've been employed by the client for your expertise, and then some idiot makes you redo stuff just to get them a name for themselves. God, I'm venting now, aren't I? Oh, those flipping producers. Oh,
Yeah. For me, like with stuff like that, especially because I'm now freelance, with stuff like that, if they want to mess me around and make me do like stuff multiple times, I usually it's written in the contract that you've got like a certain amount of iterations or whatever, but generally like they're pretty tolerant of you just like redoing stuff, especially if they've asked you to. So for me, that is like factored into my hourly rate, where it's like, okay, you want me to do this for the 1,000th time? Well, you can pay me for the 1,000th time. So and then that's just part of the day job. But personally, I've never been in a studio and had that situation, fortunately.
Yeah, I've got some thoughts on crunch for you, Baz, especially for any students listening. This is my attitude towards it now. So just like what these Sarah and everyone was saying here, and Anya and that, and Baz. Early in my career, me and Dave did a lot of self-inflicted crunch because we were trying to get on. We worked together when we were juniors, and then there was a lot of that, and then there was a lot of mandated crunch. And if you're a junior going in, I would say this: just be wary that like the team or the company you're at isn't taking advantage of your willingness to show that you're there to improve and do a lot of work.
Yeah.
Speak to other people and get opinions on it, because it might not be easy for you to spot coming in that someone is taking the piss, essentially, and saying, this person's really throwing, let's give them all this stuff. And then if they don't do it again, we can sort of say, oh, well, you was trying hard before. That's the thing you've got to look out for.
Yeah.
So what I did, I remember there was a point where I was doing a lot of both my own, inflicted crunch, because I wanted to really make sure the certain thing I was doing was really good, and times where the company was saying doing this. And when I got to that point where I felt a lot more confident in speaking up against stuff, I remember just telling my lead, I'm not doing any more crunch for a while. I've done a lot, and that was it. And they can't force you to do what they're going to do. They cannot force you to do it. You have to. And if someone is forcing you to do it, or they're saying they can, then saying that they should, then I would say that place is not where you should be working, especially if it is affecting your mental health and your work. Your life outside of work. So that's my thoughts on it. But I don't see anything wrong. Like I said, me and Dave did some really sort of intense hours when we got in, just because we were young and eager and we didn't have the commitments and stuff like that. So you've got to balance, you've got to just find that balance. If you think you're getting taken advantage of, speak to people, ask people, reach out and get an opinion. And that's what
I think that's really important, Sean. I don't know what sort of age range of people we've got in this room at the minute, or what your kind of family commitments are. But Sean has touched on something that is absolutely massive, and it's that if you're single, let's go from one extreme to the other. So if you're single, you're young, you live with your parents, your mum and dad are looking after you, your mum's making your tea for you, or your dad's making your tea for you and doing your washing, and you live to make art, and you can kind of crunch, but it doesn't feel like crunch. You're just doing lots of work and enjoying doing it. But where it really starts to make you ill is when you move on a little bit, and you get your own place, and you've got commitments, and you might have family, you might end up having children, and then all of a sudden you can't really crunch, because you've got to balance your family life with your work life. And one of the biggest and saddest thing that happens to people that you all have to really be careful about is don't let your working life destroy your personal life. Don't let it break down your relationships. Don't let it ruin your relationships with your partners and your children and your family. If you get to the stage where you're having to keep continually making excuses for what you're doing to your partner, you really need to sort of stand back and go, something's going on here. So, if you've got nothing, I'm going to be sort of quite blunt about it. If you've got nothing better to do, crunch your heart out while you're enjoying it, and it's okay. But don't let it affect your personal life. We all need to earn a few quid, but the thing is to love and be loved by your family and your friends. That's why you're on the planet. You're not on the planet to make cool art. I mean, you're there. Should be a means to an end for you. Well, there you go. That killed the conversation.
There's a really good question there for everyone, Baz. I've sent to you to end on there. It's a good definitely a good one for students.
Let's have a look. Let's just flick it over. Oh yeah. Oh God, this one. How did you break into industry? How long did it take? It feels a lot harder to get into it now. I'm always looking for advice and stories of how others broke in, and that really is the question of the to me, the 2 days of Imagine 2020 is all about that question, because this is the difficult, it's getting so incredibly competitive for juniors to break in. How did you break, for everybody, how did you break in, and what is the best piece of advice? I know it's not an easy question. The best piece of advice you could give to young career artists who are trying to get their foot in industry. Anybody want to take that one?
I'll go first.
Go on then.
For me, I broke into the industry pretty much straight out of uni, so that definitely felt like I got lucky. But then I think everyone says that when they break into the industry. But for me, we had people coming in to do lectures at my university from Creative Assembly, and I made a point of approaching them and being like, hey, I think they were ex-students from our course, so I kind of knew them, but I made a point of being like, hey, here's my work, blah, blah, blah. And they put out the offer that they would look at people's work and give advice and critique. So again, I made a point of getting in touch with them and sending them my work. And that actually led to them referring me for a job. So it was like a traineeship. So that's how that happened. And the work that I had in my portfolio at the time was very much, it was my final major project from university, and it was that I was asking for advice on. So I was making my final project for uni and constantly messaging these people and being like, hey, can you give me a paint over? And they were so useful, and they obviously just decided to put me forward for a traineeship. And all the work that I was doing was all stuff that it kind of comes back to how I chill out and going to gardens and things like that. It was all stuff that I was super into. So I wasn't trying to make something that was cool or edgy. I don't really even know what I mean by that, but I wasn't trying to make something cool. It was just I really like gardens, and I really like this specific book, and I'm super passionate about it, so I'm just going to make it and put my heart and soul into it. So I definitely say find the thing that makes you tick and you love, and just go so deep into that, and your passion will kind of show through from that.
And what do you think about that, Sarah? Because you've had you had an interesting journey to where you are now. You kind of sort of dipped in and out, didn't you, of education?
Yeah,
and
I didn't draw for about 5 years, because I left college really disillusioned and hated art for a fair bit after I left, because at the time when I was taking college and stuff, it was I wanted to make games, and I was drawing spaceships and aliens and creatures and everything. And my teachers at the time were just flat out there's no future in it, don't try it, do points of sale and window shop dressing, and that's what I've got certificates for, funny enough. And then after I finished those 2 courses, I actually, when I was doing that course, I got to do a bit of CAD, and I was like, oh, this is actually really cool. But it wasn't the forefront of the course, so it was only once a week, and but it kind of gave me a taste for it. So after college, leaving with what I had, I went to Asda. I worked at Asda for, I think it was about 5 years, and then I went to Sony Computer Entertainment afterwards, and it was weird because at the time Sony offered art courses, and I was just doodling on my desk some spaceship and stuff. And my manager at the time was like, "That's really good. Have you thought about joining the art course?" And I was like, "I didn't even know they had one." So I signed up for that and did that for about 6 months, with the intention of going to Studio Liverpool that had done all the Wipeout stuff.
Yeah.
So So for 6 months, that's what he taught us. He taught us how to build the ships, how to make them, what they look for. And then 2 weeks after that course had finished, he closed Studio Liverpool down. But I had at that point got a taste for art then of drawing these wipeout craft. And I was like, no, I have to pursue this. So the next day I quit, handed me notice in, because I got an unconditional offer from uni to go and do that for 3 years. So I just poured my heart and soul into the uni course. And 2 weeks after I'd finished uni, I got an offer at Star Citizen. Because I just put up all the stuff I'd learnt at Stony, all the stuff I'd learnt in uni and stuff, and yeah, I was picked up that way. But I'll say I didn't get into the game industry until I was like 28 years old. So I don't think anyone should worry about your age or think that your time's progressing too fast, because I did it the long way. I thought I was done with art when I finished college. I was just like, this sucks, I'm done. And now I do it for a living, and it's like, hey, I made it.
Well, David and Sean, you came out of the UCLan course in Preston, didn't you? Together, you were on the course together, and sort of progressed that way. I remember Sean. I remember when you was at the Oldham College, Sean. I remember bumping into you where you popped back up a couple of weeks to say hello to Frank. So what are your views on breaking in? And you were kind of lucky, you guys, weren't you? Really? Well, you were very talented, so maybe luck wasn't.
I'll let Dave take that.
Go on, Dave.
That's all right. Yeah, I think one thing I've noticed, there's no set rule of like this is how you get in. I've spoken to a lot of people, and it happens differently for everybody. It seems, for one reason or another. But for myself, yeah, we had an industry lecturer would come in. And they would kind of teach us, and through kind of my work I got noticed, and I got a chance to pick up some like work experience during my I just finished my second year, so I got to do a bit of work experience at a studio. It turned out they were kind of happy with the stuff I was doing, so they put me on a short-term contract, which was awesome. I was still at university, so I was being able to kind of earn some money in the career that I was pursuing.
Yeah.
And that was a really interesting time, because I was there for maybe a month, I think. And during that time, the studio actually went under. And that was like a sort of a wake-up call. I was this, I guess, a very innocent student at that point. And I saw, these people with families and mortgages to pay. They got to look after their families and all the rest of it. And they suddenly got 30 days to finish their contracts and find more work. So that was a real wake-up call. I definitely questioned at that point. I was like, is this something I really want to do? I wasn't, it was my first experience of that. I didn't know how frequent it was. Is this, the standard every few years this happens or whatever? But yeah, someone who worked at that studio, who did lecturing, then these people don't. The studio went under, but these people don't sort of disappear, and groups of them went away and they set up different studios around the Manchester area.
Yeah.
And sort of during my third year, they were looking to staff up on junior art stuff, and because I've worked with them previously at the studio, and also sort of kept up that sort of link with them whilst they were still doing stuff with the courses, they kind of offered me a job. Which was amazing, to be halfway through my third year and offered this job at this kind of indie studio that was working on sort of all types of cool stuff. Yeah. I thought it was great. I went literally finished on the Friday at university and started the job on the Monday.
They're all going, you can't believe that happened to you.
Yeah, just straight in and yeah, I wish I took a week off. 15 years on, I wish I took a week off.
Rub it in, Dave. Yeah.
No, it was really cool, but also I didn't realise at the time, it was an independent studio, and that comes with its own risk, and it's a small startup. For me at the time, like Baz was saying, there was, I had no commitments, I had no mortgages and all the rest of it, so I could, sort of take that risk. But yeah, going back to my previous point, it seems to happen differently for everybody, and it's not always down. That was sort of an alignment of the moons and the stars and everything. You know, that I knew people that were setting up a studio. They had positions available for 3D artists, and I was one of the people they approached for it. So it's, you know, it's kind of right place, right time, and a bit of luck thrown in as well, I think.
Well,
Yeah,
I'm gonna.
Sorry,
Oh, sorry.
I was just going to add as well, when we did have the industry workshop as well, there was portfolio days. And I know from because I was there as one of the speakers a few years back, we picked up a few people from just looking through their portfolios.
Yeah.
So that's another way. Once obviously COVID's died down a bit, once those start up again, I'd definitely recommend visiting an industry workshop, because you do get people scouting for talent.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing. Industry workshops and like just any kind of networking event, like it really is, like meeting people is such a huge part of it.
Definitely.
Just like Imagine Digital Arts.
Exactly.
That's the thing.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Why we're here?
That's that. I just want to. I'm gonna bring in Badge and Amber in a second. Badge is kind of lurking around with his mic off. I don't know if he is around. But one of the things that has started to happen, I think, more recently has become more noticeable is, companies that do have kind of graduate programs and internships, and they've actually got people dedicated in the company to go out and look for people and cut people a break. So Creative Assembly, we've been dealing with Creative Assembly recently through Badge, and they're obviously very active in trying to help people, and we're sort of we've been sort of supported by that over the last few months, which is great. So what I'd like to say to students, people that try to break in, that everybody wants you to be successful. Nobody's got it in for you, or there's not, they're people that need personnel. There's a lot of demand for people, but there's another side to it, and this is the hard word for you, really. You've actually got to be good. You've got to be talented. You've got to be dedicated. You've got to have the right effective skills. You've got to be able to communicate with people and not annoy people and not be a pain in the ass if you let into a studio. But what you've got to understand is, your portfolio is absolutely everything, and if your portfolio isn't good enough, you won't get a job. You might get a job as a QA tester initially and get your foot in the door, and then you're going to have to start working really hard to get people in the company to notice you. Now that brings me on to what Amber is going to be talking about tomorrow. So some of you might be aware that Amber is a student who came off my course about 5 or 6 years ago, and Amber's going to be talking tomorrow about how she sort of felt, how she developed up through her personal work to getting on a course, to then how it was on the course, and then what she had to do to. Amber kind of got a break, but
yeah, I'd say I'm really lucky compared to other stories of what I've heard of other devs getting in.
Yeah, and one of the things that might have helped with that, which is key to what we've said before, is you've got to network. If you're shy and you're retiring and you're very self-conscious about your work, and you don't show it to people, and you're just hiding in your bedroom, you will never get a job in the games industry if your portfolio's under your bed.
You'll lose out on so many opportunities.
Yeah. So you've got to get out. You've got to start talking to people. But a community like this that we're trying to build up is about supporting you and gaining you access to these world-class people who all want you to be successful. But you won't be successful unless you talk to them and you show, you post something, or
I don't
Amber.
need to do a talk now. You've pretty much done it.
No, Amber, Amber, your talk sits right in the middle of all of this. This is like, it's so important that people see your talk tomorrow, and it's so important that people understand. The exposure is probably one of the biggest things, isn't it? Getting access to people, and when you was on the course, we had Sean coming in and Dave coming in. I remember Dave doing the house project with you.
Yeah.
And so get yourself noticed. People, if you get I know there's a lot of people from different colleges and unis possibly on here. Make sure that if you've got some industry people coming in, you're not the person that runs off and hides in the toilet. Okay, you make sure you're at the front of the class with your portfolio open, and even if you don't think your work's great, show them and get some feedback from them. So yeah, oh my God, I'm taking over here. Come on, someone help me out here.
I agree.
Yeah, portfolios are really important, aren't they? The same as like attitude as well. That makes
Yeah.
such a difference.
Oh yeah, big time.
Someone's
Definitely.
got the attitude.
There's going to be a drinking game on how many times I say the word portfolio and how important it is.
I got into the games industry with, I didn't have a degree. I had very poor GCSEs, and but I just loved drawing and painting, and I knocked on a lot of doors. There wasn't the internet at that time. That's all down. You know, sending off floppy disks to people.
We got it easy nowadays, really. Being able to put stuff on the internet and email people and stuff.
Oh
So
yeah,
easy.
I'm that old. I remember like giving my portfolio out on CDs and stuff.
I got
got it
taught
easy.
that at university, and then like that was in 2013, and it was like, this is not a thing anymore. We don't need to do this.
Yeah.
I had the same when I was taught how to use a rotary pen and an airbrush, a real airbrush. You know, I was a magazine illustrator, and then they brought out this thing called the Apple Mac, and it was like, oh, what's this? Oh, you can draw on a computer now. Oh God. There's a big downside to all that exposure you can get. It also means that you're in a massive market. I only had to go locally around Manchester and knock on a few doors, or what I used to do is just go into a newsagent and find the computer game magazines, and then go to just after, like on the contents page of a computer game magazine, it would usually say who the publisher was and how you contacted them, and you'd also find out who the artist was that done the illustration on the front. And I used to just ring them up and say, that magazine front cover you've got is really nice and I love the work of such and such a body, but I'd do that the same kind of work for you and I'd do it for free. And that's how I got started.
Undercutting.
Undercutting. I needed to
Throat method.
Yeah. The first one's free, and then it gets more and more progressively more expensive the more you want it. But no, the internet is it's a double-edged sword, isn't it? Because you've now got the opportunity for exposure, but you're now competing with the whole world, not Greater Manchester when I started out. So there's a lot of competition out there. So
yeah, I think it can be like intimidating looking at
Yeah.
ArtStation. Like I look at stuff on there and I'm like, oh my God,
We all
where
do
has
it.
this person come from? I need to just
Totally.
retire and give up now. But I think it's really important for students to try and keep in mind, like when you submit your portfolio for a job, you're going to be, judged as a junior artist, not as a senior artist that's got 10 plus years or whatever. So it's definitely, don't be intimidated by the artwork on ArtStation. It should inspire you that, those people have worked, years and years to get to that level. And if you do the same, you'll achieve those.
I always say, when you're starting out, don't compare yourself to someone with 10 years experience, because that doesn't lead to a good place. You compare yourself to where you was 6 months ago.
I really don't need to do my talk now.
That's how you feel good about yourself. But shall we wrap that up there, Baz, as the end of that, and we'll be back tomorrow.
Yeah, that was good. That